A critical factor that led to the initiation of collapse was thermal expansion of long-span floor systems located on the east side of the building. Here you see a photo of these long-span beams in World Trade Center 7 near a specific column involved in the collapse, column 79. Anyone who has run a tight jar lid under hot water to help loosen it up knows that metal expands when it gets hot. Beyond expansion, heat also causes steel to lose strength and stiffness. In our investigation of the collapse of towers 1 and 2, loss of strength and stiffness was more important. For World Trade Center 7, thermal expansion was a critical factor. These effects occur at temperatures much lower than those required to reduce steel strength and stiffness. Now, if you look at this poster, you can see the kinds of effects we're talking about by thermal expansion. You have here the exterior wall of the building, which is pretty rigid, and the floor system, which is a steel, concrete, composite floor system, expands due to heat. Fires might be under the floor system and as well as on the top of the floor. And as the expansion occurs, steel expands more than the concrete, and you can see the beams pushing out. But before these beams can actually push out, the connection between the concrete and the steel has to break. The composite action has to be lost. And that happens when the shear studs that connect the concrete and the steel actually fail. Steel expands in a much more greater magnitude than does concrete when you heat it up. So, as a result of that, you have failures between the steel and the concrete, but you also have 3 additional effects. One, you could have beams that are here that are restrained from expanding, prevented from expanding because of this column here, for example, and that can buckle. And you see an example of a buckled beam right here. You can have another situation where the beams actually are free to expand and push this major girder connecting these 2 columns and actually cause this girder to buckle. The third thing that can happen is as this girder is pushed by the beams, it can break the connections with the column. So there are 3 effects that can happen as a result of thermal expansion. So in summary, the exterior columns of the building were more closely spaced than the interior ones. When fires heated the floor system, thermal expansion of the floor beams caused damage to connections between the steel beams and the concrete slab of the composite floor system. Some of the beams buckled. Others pushed the girders, causing some of them to buckle. A few girders lost their connections to columns, triggering floor failures. Fires on floors 7 through 9 and 11 through 13 were particularly severe. Long-span steel beams on the lower floors of the east side of the building expanded significantly due to these fires, damaging the floor framing on multiple floors. Eventually, a girder on floor 13 lost its connection to a critical interior column that provided support for the long girder, and the displaced girder and other local fire-induced damage caused floor 13 to collapse. Our study has identified thermal expansion as a new phenomenon that can cause the collapse of a structure. Our study has identified thermal expansion as a new phenomenon that can cause the collapse of a structure.